Forbidden love. Young prince falls for mature woman, shocking truth. In a kingdom shaped by marble, halls and ancient laws, a young prince lived, surrounded by duty, tradition, and silent expectation. From the moment he learned to walk, his path was drawn. Before him, straight and narrow, guided by crowns, counsels, and unspoken commands. Yet within his heart lived a quiet unrest, a longing he could not name. He was admired for his youth, his grace, his promise. The court saw him as a future shaped in gold, a ruler in the making, but they did not see the solitude that followed him through endless corridors, or the weight that pressed upon his spirit. When the palace fell silent at night, she entered his life without ceremony, without announcement, a woman shaped by time, not by fantasy. Her presence was calm, her voice steady, her eyes carried stories. Written long before he was born, she was not part of the courtly games, nor the glittering circles of ambition. She belonged to a quieter world, one shaped by reflection, patience, and truth. Their first meeting was unremarkable, to others yet unforgettable. To him it happened in a sunlit gallery where tapestries whispered of history. She stood, studying a painting not as an observer, but as someone listening. Deeply, he paused without knowing why, drawn by the stillness she carried. When she turned and met his gaze, there was no surprise, no flattery, only recognition. She saw him not as a prince, but as a soul, searching for something unnamed. That moment settled into his heart like a seed waiting for light. Days passed, yet her presence lingered in his thoughts. He found himself returning to that gallery, hoping to glimpse her again. When they met once more, their words were few yet meaningful. They spoke of art, of history, of the way time reshapes truth. Their conversations were gentle, never rushed, never forced. She never sought his attention, yet she never withdrew it either. She listened in a way that made him feel heard, not praised. He found comfort in her honesty, a refuge from the endless performance of royalty. With her, he did not have to pretend. As weeks unfolded, their meetings became a quiet ritual. Often by chance, often by design, they spoke of life beyond the palace walls, of roads that led nowhere and everywhere, of choices made and paths left behind. She spoke of love not as fantasy, but as endurance, as courage shaped by loss and hope. He listened, captivated not only by her words, but by the calm strength behind them. She carried no illusion of perfection, yet she stood, complete within herself. That completeness unsettled him and awakened something deeper than admiration. He began to realize the truth slowly, gently, and then all at once. He was falling not into a dream, but into reality. Not toward youth or beauty, but toward understanding, toward a woman whose years had carved wisdom into her spirit. The awareness frightened him. The world had rules written in stone. A prince was meant to choose alliances, not affection. Youth, not maturity. Obedience, not desire. Yet his heart refused to listen. He noticed how her presence steadied him, how her silence spoke louder than praise, how her smile carried no demand, only warmth. He felt seen in ways he never had before. Late nights found him restless, staring out over the palace gardens, wondering when duty had become a cage. He questioned whether love was meant to follow rules written by others, or whether it answered only the quiet truth within. She too felt the change, though she guarded her heart carefully. She understood the weight of difference, the danger of whispers, the cruelty of judgment. She had lived long enough to know that love could cost everything. Yet when he looked at her with unguarded emotion, when his voice softened in her presence, she felt the pull of something rare and honest, something neither of them had planned. Their connection deepened without declaration. Without promises, it lived, in shared glances and pauses between words, in the comfort of simply being. Near each moment carried the awareness of risk, yet also the certainty of truth. The palace remained unaware, wrapped in its rituals and illusions, yet beneath its grandeur a forbidden bond was forming, quietly, patiently growing stronger with every shared breath. He struggled with guilt, with fear, with the knowledge that the world would never understand. What they saw as scandal, he felt as destiny. What they would call wrong felt more right than anything he had known. In her presence, he learned that love was not always loud, not always youthful, not always celebrated. Sometimes it was quiet, sometimes it was hidden, sometimes it came wrapped in sacrifice. She reminded him that love was not possession, but choice, not escape, but acceptance. She never asked him to abandon his world, only to be honest within it. As the season changed and shadows grew longer, their bond stood unspoken, yet undeniable. The young prince and the mature woman stood at the edge of something powerful, something dangerous, something real. Neither knew what the future would demand. Neither knew how long secrecy could survive. Yet both understood that what had begun could not be undone. Their hearts had already crossed the line drawn by tradition and fear, and in that crossing a truth had been born, one that would challenge a kingdom and reshape their lives forever. The days that followed carried a different weight, as if time itself had slowed to observe the quiet unfolding of their bond. The prince moved through palace life with a heart divided between obligation and the growing truth he could no longer deny. Every corridor, every ceremony felt distant compared to the moments he shared with her. Their meetings became fewer yet deeper. Each encounter held a gravity neither could ignore. Silence often spoke louder than words. In those silences, they found safety, understanding, and an intimacy untouched by haste or illusion. She sensed the storm within him, the conflict between the crown he wore and the heart he guarded. She never pressured, never demanded. She offered only. The air within the palace changed quietly yet unmistakably. What had once felt distant now pressed close like unseen eyes following every step. The prince sensed it in the pauses of conversation, in the careful glances of courtiers, in the sudden politeness of advisors who once spoke freely. Whispers moved through the halls without names, yet heavy with implication. A secret unnamed but suspected began to take shape. The prince understood that silence was no longer invisible. It had begun to draw attention. He became more careful, measured every word, every movement. Yet even caution could not erase the truth written in his eyes whenever she was near. Their connection lived beyond concealment, carried in the stillness between them. She felt the shift as well. Her instincts, sharpened by years of experience, warned her of approaching danger. She watched the palace with new awareness, sensing how quickly affection could be twisted into accusation. They met less often now, yet when they did, the moments carried an intensity born of uncertainty. Each meeting felt like both refuge and farewell, a quiet defiance against the world pressing in. One afternoon, an advisor spoke, gently yet deliberately, of suitable alliances, of expectations tied to lineage and future stability. The prince listened with calm restraint, knowing the words were not innocent. They were probes searching for reaction, confirmation weakness. That evening he found her waiting in their familiar place beneath the old stone archway hidden from most eyes. The tension between them was heavy, yet unbroken. She did not ask what had been said. She already knew. They spoke of risk openly now, of consequence and sacrifice. She told him she would accept whatever choice he made without resentment, without claim. She refused to become a burden upon his destiny. Her words wounded him more than any threat. He realized then that love was not possession but protection, not demand but devotion. He promised her that whatever path unfolded he would not allow truth to be rewritten into shame. The rumors grew bolder. Servants lingered longer, whispers carried farther. The palace no longer felt like a sanctuary but a stage preparing for revelation. The prince stood at the center, aware that his silence was becoming a statement. He wrestled with fear, not of scandal, but of loss. The thought of her being judged, reduced, dismissed, or erased by cruel narratives, ignited a fierce resolve within him. He understood that love sometimes demanded visibility, even when it threatened everything. She urged patience, reminding him that storms, past and reckless, honesty could destroy more than it saved. Yet she also saw the fire in him, the shift from hesitation to resolve. Their bond deepened under pressure shaped by shared endurance. They found strength not in secrecy alone, but in mutual trust. Each glance became an affirmation, each meeting an act of courage. One night, beneath a sky heavy with clouds, he confessed what he had long known, that empty performance no crown could fill. She listened quietly, tears unshed, understanding the weight of his words. The palace lights flickered in the distance, a reminder of the world that waited to judge, to define, to condemn. Yet in that moment, standing together, they felt a clarity that transcended fear. They did not know when the truth would surface, only that it would. And when it did, it would change everything. Their love had moved beyond hiding. It now stood on the edge of revelation. The young prince and the mature woman faced the coming storm not as fantasy, but as reality. Their hearts aligned, their resolve steady. They had crossed the point of return. What began as quiet understanding had become an unbreakable bond. And as dawn approached, carrying both hope and danger, they stood ready to face whatever truth demanded. The morning arrived with an unnatural stillness, as though the palace itself held its breath. The prince felt it. Before he heard anything, a heaviness. In the air, a silence stretched, too tight to remain unbroken. He rose, knowing that the day would not end as it began. The first signs appeared in small ways. Conversations halted when he entered rooms once warm with familiarity, grew cold with caution. Eyes followed him, not with admiration, but with curiosity sharpened by suspicion. The truth, no longer slept quietly. It had begun to stir. By midday, a summons arrived, gentle in wording, yet firm in intent. The council requested his presence not as prince in waiting, but as a subject of concern. He understood then that the whispers had found shape and direction. He walked through the great hall with steady steps, though his Heart moved faster. The faces around him blurred into a single expression of expectation. They were waiting not for answers, but for confirmation. The council spoke carefully of responsibility, of image, of the fragile balance between tradition and stability. They spoke of influence, of inappropriate attachments, of concerns voiced by many. They never spoke her name, yet she stood between every word. The prince listened in silence, and when he spoke, his voice carried a calm that surprised even him. He did not deny, he did not explain, he simply stated that his heart had chosen truth over convenience. The room shifted like stone disturbed at its foundation. Gasps did not escape, but tension thickened. The unspoken became undeniable. Outside the chamber, the truth traveled faster than any messenger. Servants whispered, courtiers speculated, and judgment formed before understanding could breathe. The story twisted as it moved, shaped by fear and fascination. She heard the change in the air before she heard the words "A." Stillness followed her through the corridors, a space carved by curiosity and quiet cruelty. She stood composed, though every instinct warned her of what was coming. When they met again, there were no illusions. Left between them, the secrecy that once protected them had dissolved. Replaced by exposure and consequence, they spoke, not of regret, but of resolve. He refused without hesitation. He told her that a life built on denial was no life at all. That love hidden to preserve comfort was a betrayal of everything they were. He chose to stand not above her, but beside her. The palace reacted swiftly. Distance replaced courtesy, invitations were withdrawn. Conversations ceased entirely. They were no longer subjects of curiosity, but symbols of disruption. Yet in that isolation, something unexpected emerged. Freedom, the freedom of truth spoken and choice claimed. They walked through the gardens openly now, no longer avoiding glances or hiding steps. Some watched with disapproval, others with silent awe. For the first time, a prince had chosen honesty over performance, and a woman, judged by age, stood unashamed beside him. The kingdom buzzed with debate. Some called it disgrace, others called it courage. History began forming in real time, shaped by voices both harsh and hopeful. As night fell, the prince stood at the balcony overlooking the city lights. He knew the crown would demand a price and that the future would not be gentle. Yet for the first time he felt whole. She stood with him, not behind, not beneath, but equal. The world might never accept them fully, but they had accepted each other completely. The truth was no longer shocking. It was simply real. And in that reality, the young prince and the mature woman stood unbroken, ready to face whatever tomorrow would demand. The days that followed the revelation moved with deliberate weight. Each hour carried consequence. Each silence demanded response. The palace no longer pretended balance, it prepared for decision. The council gathered again, this time without softness. Without caution, their words were firm, shaped by tradition, lineage, and the unbroken chain of rule. They spoke of crowns not as symbols, but as obligations that could not bend to personal truth. They offered him a choice, though framed as necessity, a future secured through alliance, approval and restoration, or a path away from power stripped of privilege yet honest in its simplicity. The prince listened without interruption. His gaze steady, his posture calm. He felt the gravity of history pressing upon him, the voices of ancestors echoing through stone and memory. Yet beneath that weight stood something, stronger a clarity he had never known before. He thought of her presence steady and unwavering. He thought of nights shaped by truth, not performance. He thought of the man he had become not through inheritance, but through love. When he spoke, his voice carried neither defiance nor apology. He said that a crown gained through denial was no crown at all. That leadership built on fear of judgment would rot from within. He declared that he would not trade his soul for acceptance. The words settled slowly, heavily, like dust after collapse. Some faces hardened. Others revealed something like respect, though none spoke it. By evening, the decision was sealed. He would step away from succession. He would remain a son of the kingdom, but not its ruler. The crown would